Friends of the adventure bike community, here is the dream you can touch with kind of not sticky decals. But this baby got 200 kilometers on it right now. I bought it with 50 or 60. It was a part of an auction, kind of a liquidation auction, and I just was the highest bidder to get this bike. So I thought I might give it a shot and try it out and see if I like it or not. You can have a look at other reviews on the technical details and stuff, but I want to give you a feedback on how this bike rides. Keep in mind, I'm a huge fan of the DRC 400, especially the E model, which I do have, which is my perfect adventure bike for now, and maybe this can be even better. So we got the European kind of restricted version here with the paper air filter and stuff, also the restricted ECU and the restricted exhaust. It's got two cats in there, one here and one in the front somewhere. And yeah, still the bike has a nice sound to it. You will hear it in a bit. So let's start riding, and I'll just give you an update or a quick intro on what this bike is doing well and what maybe not. So first off, for the controls, that's pretty self-explanatory. You have the indicators and the horn, warning lights and engine start stop on this side, throttle of course, brakes, clutch. For the high beam, I just figured out that you cannot just push this button here. You can also throw it outwards, and that will kind of keep the high beam in place. Yesterday when I was riding through the night, I always held it like that because I didn't figure that functionality yet out. So when we turn on the bike, we have an options menu. You can see that nice Kove dashboard coming on, and you can then scroll up and down with these buttons here on the left hand side, and there's an OK button and a back button, or like an enter and a back button here. So you can set up your ABS mode, trip data and whatever. I didn't figure that one out yet, but yeah, there's not too many options in here, but you can do some stuff. But we don't want to go into the settings, we want to go riding. The bike is actually already hot. I just rode it here, and you can hear the idle is not too stable, and when I let the clutch out, there's a lot of clunking noises, but I think that needs to be the case with this bike here. Keep in mind that I'm still in the break-in period, so I will not go over a third of throttle, even though I'm going on a mountain road here. I will keep it kind of, keep it down. So 150 kilometers ago, I picked up this bike with, of course, 50 kilometers, and I already did an oil change. Sorry. This bike has no way of telling how much oil is in there. There's no side glass or anything. So the best you can do, there's different options, but what I did, I cut a zip tie or kind of a plastic piece that I can put in where you fill up the oil, and that will then kind of guide you how much oil is in there. And because I didn't have any reference on it, I decided to change the oil right when I got it. I put in some 10W50 semi-synthetic, no, fully synthetic actually. And that changed the bike completely. I don't think it was the oil, but when I did the oil change on the magnetic bolt, there was a lot of metal shavings and stuff. Not really big chunks, but like fine pieces. And yeah, with that oil change, the bike was a lot smoother to shift. And I feel now the bike also becomes much easier to ride in lower RPMs. so I'm gonna keep it calm here. Probably I'll be overtaken quite a lot of times, but I don't care. I want to give this engine a chance of surviving as long as it can. So let's go to the riding ergonomics. You can see there's a huge seat. You can go from all the way here to all the way in the front. And that is quite straight, so it's really easy to move back and forth. I mean, that's interesting for riding corners. I'm sorry for that cough. Woo. So that's interesting for riding in corners, but also when you're kind of in the sand or whatever, then that's quite handy. Comparing it to the DRC I have, the suspension feels much stiffer. It's not uncomfortably stiff, but you feel that it's not a dual sport. It's more like it's a race bike basically, trimmed down to a street legal version, and I feel the suspension also makes up for this. The best comparison I have is I had a Husqvarna 701 Enduro, and that kind of had the same feeling to it. So if you kind of bump on it, you feel especially the rear shock is really stiff. And also on speed bumps and stuff, you definitely feel them. It soaks them up quite nicely, but the harder you ride it, the better the suspension works. Maybe also keep that in mind for longer trips. It's not going to be a DRC which is plush and soft and will kind of swallow all the potholes and stuff. This bike will really let you feel them. Now in terms of throttle response, this is a 450cc engine made in China. It's a Chinese specific model. And they have used this engine, I guess, in some form in the Fantic Caballero 500. Other than that, it's yeah, quite unique to this bike. So especially the lower throttle half feels yeah, quite linear, but there's no real punch to it, like nothing as you would get it from an FCR 39 carb on a DRC. It's definitely noticeable, the injection of course and the emissions regulation, which kind of keep the bike running lean in part throttle positions. This changed drastically in the last 150 kilometers. The bike became much more able to run in lower RPMs. But everything beneath 4,000 is kind of unrideable, because then it just starts to kind of jump around. Let's try that. So that's 3,000 now. And now after 4 it starts to pull. I had a guy explaining that very nice. He's saying there's no tractor factor to it, so no real torque at the bottom, no umph. Not something that you're maybe accustomed to from older single-cylinder bikes like the XT600, the Husqvarnas, the KTMs and so on. Sometimes there are some pops to it. I did not find out how you can kind of provoke them, but at some RPMs and throttle positions it will kind of pop quite nicely. And actually there's a lot of intake noise, even though it's the restricted version. So the throttle is quite mellow, I would say. If you go too hard on the throttle, it will not throw you off. It's not a race tune or anything like that. It's a European compliant bike with all its advantages and disadvantages. But still though, I kind of get around with it. It doesn't have the punch as my DRC has, but of course this DRC is also equipped with other camshafts and carburetor and whatnot. And this bike is bone stock, so I guess there's still plenty of room for improvement if you would want to go there. The shifting feels pretty good so far. It's kind of clunky sometimes, so when you shift into gears, if you shift up, that's pretty simple, that works pretty nicely. But sometimes downshifting, especially if you're already in a lower RPM range, that's kind of hard to do properly. But I expect that will be improving over time during the break-in period. I never ridden it over 6,000 RPMs really. So I think that's where the power lies. I'm just cruising around, but you can already get get accustomed to the characteristics of the bike. Maybe also important to mention, I'm 1 meter and 92 centimeters, and that is the low version, just because I didn't get the other version for that good price. And for me, it could be taller. I could touch the ground, even though with 5 centimeter taller variant, but still that's quite practical, especially when I imagine going into harder terrain. That's not too bad if you still have a foot to kind of touch the ground. With that setup, I can easily touch the ground with both feet, even while riding. So the only thing I would like to have is more ground clearance, because that is kind of limited with that bike. I don't know if I'm gonna use it up all, but just for the sakes of hitting rocks and whatnot, I would actually want to convert it to the high option, but I don't know, or I did not figure out yet what is necessary. I could imagine it's just internally changing some spacers in the spring from down to up, and maybe in the rear it's the same. I'll check with a Kove dealer if they'll can let me know what it takes to change that. Other than that, for the ergonomics, for my size, it's really nice. It's handling pretty well, and it's also quite linear in the way of throwing it into corners. Like there's no momentum at some point when you throw it in the corner. It just feels quite stable and linear. I already balanced out the front wheel because that was just a mess. It was, it has a rim lock in it, and it's not balanced at all. So I did my best. I didn't take the wheel out, but I found another guy who balanced it, so I could just kind of eye gauge the weight he put on there, and kind of do the same thing too with this one. Handling is quite nice, also on higher speeds. At around 80 kilometers an hour, especially with the unbalanced wheel, there is some head shake to it, but nothing major, nothing I will concern about, and it kind of feels quite similar to what a DRC 400 does, from how agile it is. It's pretty similar, I would say. The brake performance is okay. It's not that much better than with my DRC, which has a much smaller rotor. So this is a 27 centimeter rotor, I guess. On supermotos and street bike you have 320, but this is a happy middle, what also most KTMs and stuff have. If you pull on the brakes it will stop, but it will quite take some pressure on the brake lever to get it stopped, which I guess is optimal also on loose grounds, and maybe it will also improve after a while of riding it a bit harder. riding without earplugs, so I can hear myself talking, and I actually noticed that the bike is quite grunty. There's a fair bit of grunt to it, so it doesn't really need to be any louder for my likings. But the engine and also the tires, they are quite noisy. Nothing to be concerned about, but I just think there are more silent bikes that don't produce as much engine noise. But once you get used to it, that's not a problem. Like these, you definitely feel the stiff suspension, which is quite supportive though. It's imagine like your parents are being supportive. They're creating guidelines for you, and they're not tolerating everything that you do. And the DRC is kind of the opposite to me, especially with the Öhlins shock I have in there. You can throw it over anything and it will just soak it up and it will tolerate it. But this is like your kind of a bit more strict parents that will catch you when you fall, but still will kind of guide you where to go. I know, what a good reference. Brakes are actually getting better. And I mean, this bike already has braided brake lines. Or does it? Yes, of course it has. So nice, no squish or anything. I've heard people complaining about the throttle input on this bike, that it's kind of hard to get it from off throttle to slightly on throttle, but I never had an issue with that yet, except for the first 50 kilometers before I did the oil change. It was quite a bit more rough than it is right now, and now it's getting quite smooth if you're in the right RPM range. I think that bike is a pretty close competitor to the DRC. Now the only kind of unknown factor would be the reliability of this thing, because the DRC, I mean, that is bulletproof. It's kind of hard to top that. And if that bike is only half as reliable as the DRC, I think that's gonna be a really good competitor for a kind of good mix between price, weight and power. That mix you can never get like everything of it. It's like a devil's triangle, I will call it. But somewhere in the middle sits the DRC, and this bike is probably pretty close to it. Before I started this video, I was kind of thinking about it, and I was not sure if it kind of is great or just exceeding my expectations, but I thought it was just meeting my expectations. But the more I ride it now, the more it kind of starts to exceed my expectation. In terms of sound, in terms of throttle delivery, and in terms of suspension and ride quality in general.